This is a response to Billy Big Un 64 and his request for Christmas stories. So I have a Christmas story for you. As if you've listened, you've heard me say before that I was born in the mid-40s and grew up in the late 40s, all through the 50s and the first part of the 60s. In those days, people in the South, I live in northeast Alabama, and people in this area didn't have a whole lot. They worked hard, but times were still hard. So the families, and especially the children, didn't have a whole lot. There were very few things that children could call their own. You had a few clothes, very few toys. And the main thing that a child in those years could call his own was his pet. Now, in my case, that pet was a dog. Well, actually, the first dog I had was shared with my brother. It was our dog. And it was a little dog named Penny that we got when I was probably about 3 years old. And the little dog was what we called a Feist. And I don't know if a Feist is a breed throughout the world or not, but anyway, we called it a Feist. And what it was a mixed breed terrier, sort of like a mix between a Jack Russell and maybe a hound. But they were good little dogs, small dogs, very friendly little dogs. So we had a little Feist, and his name was Penny. It was my and my brother's dog, so it was our dog. And I have a picture here of Penny that I want to show you. This is a photograph of me and Penny when I was about 5 years old. We're sitting in front of a morning glory vine trellis there, and that's me and Penny there when I was about 5 years old. And as I said, that it was our dog, mine and my brother's dog. But later on, Penny got a little older, and I was told one day that Penny was going to have some puppies. So that made me very happy, and I was even happier when I was told that I got to pick my choice of the puppies, and that puppy would be my dog, something that would belong to me. And I was very excited about that. I was about, I guess, 6 or 7 when that came along. And sure enough, Penny had puppies, and I got to pick out a puppy. And I picked out a little brown puppy that had white feet and had a little white tip on his tail. And I got to pick out the name too, so I called that first little puppy Tippy. It was Tippy, my puppy. Belonged to me. And now I was so proud of him. He was a fine little puppy, very lively, just a good little dog. And I loved him to death. And we lived around in a small town at that time, and had Tippy played around and played outside. At that time, hardly anybody kept dogs inside the house. They always left them outside. They were outdoor dogs. And the dogs, natural to them, they made it okay living outdoors, and that was the way of Tippy. He lived outdoors, and we had a big time playing and romping in the neighborhood. And he was always waiting on me when I came home from school, and we just had a real good time together. But I came home from school one day, and Tippy was missing. He wasn't there. I called and didn't come, and I thought he was just off somewhere taking care of some business, and didn't think a lot about it. But then the next day, Tippy was not there. He was gone. And I was just heartbroken. Didn't know what had happened to Tippy. Of course, my parents assured me, he's probably okay, but he didn't come back. And to make matters even worse, we were planning to move at that time, to move out of the town, and we're moving out on a nearby mountain, which was several miles away from there, across the river, and moving out to a small farm. And I just couldn't stand the thought of leaving where Tippy knew home was and moving out to this other place. But I had to. It broke my heart to leave that place and without being able to take my little puppy with me, my dog with me. But anyway, we moved and moved on to the farm and started adjusting to that life, and didn't forget about Tippy. I thought about him every day, but I just knew, even as a child, that he would never come back. Us moving away and across the river. And my dad worked at that time as a delivery. He delivered heating oil to different houses all around that area. In the town we just moved from, and also in around the area we'd moved to. And he came home one day, and I noticed he had a little something wrapped up under his arm, and he was smiling real big. And I kind of met him at the door, and he couldn't wait. He took the little blanket off what he had in his arm, and it was my dog Tippy. He had brought my dog Tippy home, and I was a happy little boy that day. I'll never forget how happy I was. And the story behind what happened was there was a little boy that played in the neighborhood where we had moved from that had taken Tippy and given him to his aunt. I believe it was his aunt. And she didn't know any better and kept the little dog and liked him. And that day, my dad had been out delivering heating oil to houses, and the little dog kept barking at him while he was doing it. And he walked over, and Tippy was very distinguishable. You could tell him by the markings he had on him. And Dad walked over and saw him and recognized that was my Tippy. So we went in and talked to the lady, and sure enough, she said, yeah, that was her nephew that lived in the neighborhood, and that he'd given her that dog, and she willingly gave him up when Dad told her that he already had an owner that would be glad to get him back. So anyway, got my dog back, and I was tickled to death. And I guess by that time I was probably 9, 10 years old. He'd been gone for several months, and I was so tickled to have him back, have my puppy back. And I was getting old enough to get out and do bird hunting and go down in the woods, and Tippy was always with me. Anytime I left the house, he went along. And little Feist dogs are known for their hunting ability. It's just ingrained in them. They love to get out and chase animals and sniff trails and things like that. And Tippy was that way. If ever a squirrel ran across the yard, he was after the squirrel, or rabbit. He was always after the squirrels and the rabbits. And my dad had told me that 5 little Feist dogs make fine little hunting dogs, and one of these days we're going to take him hunting. But I took him hunting. We'd go out and hunt birds and hunt squirrels and hunt rabbits, and he did a fine job. It was play hunting we did, I guess, but still he learned the trade by him and I going off and play hunting. But anyway, my dad said we need to take Tippy hunting. And back in those days, people they did bird hunting, rabbit hunting, squirrel hunting, things like that. But at night time, they would do what we call coon hunting. In English, that's raccoon hunting, because they're nighttime animals, and people would take their dogs and go off into the woods at night and hunt coons. So my dad told me late one year, I must have been near 11, 12 years old. He said, during Christmas vacation this year, while you're out of school, one good clear night, we'll take Tippy and go coon hunting. You and your brother and I will go coon hunting. So I thought that would be great. That would be fun. So sure enough, we got out of school, I think at that time, for 2 weeks for Christmas, and my dad didn't forget. And he said, well, on this certain night, it's supposed to be a full moon, and we'll take Tippy and go down into the bottoms and go coon hunting. Now, where we lived, all the land that was farmable was in cultivation. The flat land, even the lands on the side of the hills, were farmed, and the only wooded area left was along the creeks and the streams and down in the low areas. But there were a lot of that, a lot of wooded area in the low swampy areas and along those creeks and streams. And that's where there was one not too far from our house, and that's where we planned to go coon hunting. So that night came, and we loaded up the Tippy and got us a couple of, we called it coal oil, kerosene lanterns, and I think they took a couple of guns along and went off to go coon hunting. And if you haven't been in this area, or at least in some of the other parts of the country where such is done, the method of coon hunting is to take your dog and out down into the woods at night. He'll pick up a trail, the scent. A good dog can pick up the scent of an animal long after he's been through an area. And the dog will track that animal, trail that animal, and bark as he tracks it or trails it, and finally find that animal, which in this case would be a raccoon, and he'd run the animal up the tree. And the hunters, the people that own the dogs, learn by their bark what's going on. There's a certain bark when the dog is tracking the animal. There's a certain bark when he gets closer, and there's a definite treeing bark when he runs the animal up the tree, in this case, a coon up the tree. So anyway, we got down this area and got unloaded, and as soon as we got out of the car, old Tippy got on the trail. And I can remember my dad making a remark about what a good hunting dog it was going to be. And it thrilled me, being his owner, that Tippy had proven his worth and he would be a good hunting dog. And sure enough, he just ripped out through the woods and on the trail already as soon as we got out of the car. And I was a proud owner of the dog at that time. And you could hear him going down through the woods, just yapping and barking. And my dad says he's on the trail. And usually the method is that the hunters in coon hunting will go out and kind of find them a place to sit, maybe build up a small fire, and they'll listen to the dogs run through the woods while they're on the trail of the coons. And when they hear the dog, what they call tree, run the coon up the tree, they'll get up and follow the dog and try to locate where he is and see if you can see the coon in the tree. Some people even knock the coon out of the tree or shoot the coon out of the tree and take them home and clean them and eat them. We weren't going to do that. We just wanted to let the dog run the coon and find the coon and spot him with a light. And that would be the end of the coon hunting trip. Raccoons are edible. I can remember my grandmother fixing raccoon and sweet potatoes, which I guess it was good at the time. All meat like that has a wild taste to it. Some people don't like it, but if it's prepared right, it's not too bad. But anyway, we didn't plan on even killing the coon. We just wanted to run the coon and find him. So we waited just a few minutes, and you could hear Tippy getting further and further away. And I didn't like that too much. My dog was running off through the wood, and I didn't care for that too much. But anyway, Dad assured me it'd be okay, that soon he'd be treed, and we'd go down through the woods and find him, and we'd have our sport for the night. Tippy would have done his job, and we'd have found the coon. And sure enough, before too long, Dad said he's treed, and you could hear that. That was a howl more than a yelp, way down in the woods. You could hear him treeing the coon. He had run one up a tree, and he was there telling everybody about it. And you could hear that baying and howling way down through the woods. And of course, Dad said, "Let's go." So we took off in the direction, and it's surprising how you can tell direction in a woods, a dark woods at night by a dog's bark. You can almost go directly to where the dog is. So we started off in the direction we knew that he had treed that Tippy had treed that coon. And went through the woods, and it's rough going through the woods at night, brambles and briars and limbs, and it's pretty rough. But anyway, we made our way through the woods as fast as we could. But we noticed as we thought we were getting closer to Tippy, it sounded like he was getting further away. His bark and his howl kind of changed, and it was muffled. And Dad didn't know how to explain that. But we got closer, and we thought we were getting closer, but it seemed like he was getting further away. It really concerned me. I thought he was running again. And Dad said, "No, I don't think we didn't hear him run. He's somewhere in this area, but for some reason his bark, his treeing bark is low, and it's almost changed into a kind of a distress, like a whine almost." And we could hear him, and he got weaker and weaker and weaker as we got to where we thought was closer and closer. His bark, his sound got weaker, and we knew we were in the area where he was, but yet it turned into almost a cry and a whine when we got in that area, and it was very low and muffled, and we just couldn't figure it out. We'd go around in circles, and we'd kind of hear him in one way, and we'd go back in that way, and he wouldn't be there, and we'd go back around another circle, he wouldn't be there, and it seemed like he had disappeared, but we could still hear his whimpering and whining. And I was scared to death. I couldn't imagine what had happened. And Dad had hunted all his life, and I think he kind of knew what had happened. And he told us, my brother and I, he said, I think what happened, I think Tippy was running a fox. And I think he got that fox cornered when we heard that treeing call. But he said, a fox won't go up a tree. And I didn't know. I said, well, where would he go, Dad? And he said, a fox will go down in a hole in the ground. And boy, my heart dropped again. I just thought of Tippy being in a hole in the ground, which was terrible to me. But sure enough, we got to listening, and that sound was coming not from up above or out level where we was. It was coming from down below. And he said, that's what's happened. He said, your Tippy has run that fox into a hole, and he's down in the ground somewhere. And we listened around and got real quiet, and finally we heard where he was coming from. I actually found the hole where the little dog, and he was small enough to run in behind a fox. A fox is not a real big animal, and Tippy was a little bit smaller than that. And we found the hole, and we got down and listened, and we could hear him. It sounded like he was way down in the ground, and he was just whining and crying. And I got worse and worse. I was just sick, knowing my dog was down in that hole with that fox. And Dad said, this is not good. He said, there's a possibility that fox can get him cornered down there and kill him. He said, but Dad was honest with us. He said he could kill him down that hole. And he said, I don't know what's going to happen. And we listened, and he said, it sounded like there's nothing else down there. We listened for the sound of the growl of the fox or a fight going on. There wasn't any of that. It was just Tippy whining and crying. He said, I think what's happened. He said, well, fox will do. He'll dig a hole, and he won't just dig an entrance. He'll have an entrance and an exit. And he said, that fox ran down in that hole, and your Tippy followed him. Got down there, and there was all kind of roots and dead ends and things like that down in the foxhole. He said the fox went out the other exit and left Tippy down there. He said he's either in a hole he can't back out of, or he is hung under a limb. And Dad said, I don't know what we're going to do. And we called, and again, I guess I was crying by that time. I'm pretty sure I was. I don't remember, but I was so upset I wouldn't remember what I was doing. And we called, and he whimpered and cried, and Dad said, if he's where he can't get a lot of air, he may not last long. I told my dad, I said, what we're going to do? And he said, son, we tried to dig around our hands, and the dirt was hard and couldn't dig around. He said, I don't know what we'll do. We stayed around, I guess, for 30 minutes trying to figure out, dug around with some sticks, and no good. When Dad said, this is not going to do it, so we're just going to have to go.